Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my July wrap up. I expect this will be relatively short and sweet because I didn't read that much in July. Yeah, I'll just get straight into the stats, talk a little bit about what happened in the month of July and then dive into the books. So I read in total 4 books, coming to a total of 2,290 pages. And I did start another 2 books and I did some very good progress on those other 2 books. So almost 6, but I did finish those other 2 in July. And what I did read were generally quite chunky. There were some chunky books in there. One of the books was a romance, one was a contemporary, and 2 of them were fantasy. Out of them, 3 of the books were adult, 1 was YA. 1 I gave 4.5 stars, 2 I gave 4 stars, and 1 I gave like a 3.5 star. One of them finished a series, which puts my On The Go series at 30, and I feel like I was a very whistle-stop tour of the stats. July was a bit of a slower reading month for me. Highlights of the month, or like the flavours of the month. I had my birthday in July at the beginning of the month. So I had a couple of days off. I went to Wimbledon, I went to Greenwich, I went back to my parents a couple of times. So like the weekend following my birthday, I went back to my dad's, and then the weekend after that, I went to my mum's. We went to the circus, had some nice food. And then the final couple of weekends in July have been quieter ones, like not doing so much, being in London, seeing some friends, having a more chill time, which I think was needed because I had so many weekends with back-to-back plans that it was nice to have a break. That I'd say was that. I would say like some of the flavour of the month was just stress. So I was interviewing for a promotion at work, and like I applied at the beginning of the month, and then I feel as though I just had this like feeling of stress all through the month as I was like going through different stages of that interviewing process, and like the different interviews, the different tests, the different things that you had to do. And then even like when I didn't have something in the diary for the next interview, it was still like I still have this feeling of stress like permeating the whole month, and like the whole time thinking I should be preparing for this, I should be doing more. I don't really have time to read because I've got to prepare for this interview. And then even if I am reading, I'm thinking about the interview and thinking about it. But thankfully, I had my final interview on the 31st of July and I got the job. So it was definitely worth it. I've done like the jumping around the kitchen. I'm very, very excited. I'm very happy about it. But it did mean that my July was a little bit stressful as I did all the work to get this job, which I'm very, very excited about. I'm feeling proud of myself for getting through all of that. But yeah, it meant that my reading brain was not doing very well. My reading brain wasn't around. My brain was just in a bit of an anxiety stress brain. So that is over. And whilst I'm working out my notice period, I should hopefully have some calm-ish months to do lots of reading. So I'm hoping August will be a lot better and I'll be able to read in August. That is my hope. But for July, it was a little slow. So let's just dive into the books that I did manage to read during that time. So I did manage to read The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee. This took up quite a chunk of the month, I think. It's a long book. It is a long book. It's a heavy book. It's a thick book. I think I started reading this physically. I then did finish it with the audiobook because this was a reread. So I have spoken about it before as I'm rereading this series to finish it off. So a couple of years ago, I read The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, then had to wait quite a while for the third book. Third book has now come out, so now I am rereading to read that one. This I enjoyed yet again. I think I gave it 4.5 stars the first time around, gave it the same rating this time around. I really do enjoy the plot of this book, or like the way that it's crafted. It is a multi-perspective epic fantasy story following a cast of characters in this world where everyone is very morally grey, I would say. It's got lots of very typical fantasy tropes. You have like a prophecy, you have a lost heir, you have a castle with royalty and secret passageways, you have assassins, you have religion as like a theme, you have these lost artifacts and history, and you're trying to piece it all together. I found that very, very intriguing. We're following these cast of characters in this country as it is being invaded by this other opposing force. One of them is Nail, who is like this farm boy that typical trope, but he is not just a farm boy, he's our lost heir. So there's definitely more to him than meets the eye. We then followed some of the royal family and the secret passageways and sort of the trials and tribulations that they are going through. There's lots of twists and turns with the plot, lots and lots of reveals, and some of them are quite surprising. So I really thoroughly enjoyed this. There are some very grim scenes in it. Like, I remember the chapter. I remember getting to that chapter and being like, even like the second time around, I was like, this is still very, very grim. So be prepared for that if you do dive into this. But yeah, very thoroughly enjoyed this one. I do have a full like discussion video, which I did when I read it the first time, so I can link that if you want like a full spoilery discussion on this. I read Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I listened to the audiobook for this one, so I've read, I think, pretty much all of Ali Hazelwood's published books. Not pretty much, all of them. I have read all of them. So this is her latest one. She has a formula, I would say, by now, and it's a formula that I enjoy. Again, we're set in the sort of STEM science sphere in America. We're following our main character, Elsie, who, as a side hustle, it acts as a sort of fill-in girlfriend for different people, and we follow her as she fills in for this man, and she meets his family as this fill-in girlfriend, and then she goes to an interview for this position to find that the brother of the guy that hired her to be his fill-in girlfriend is one of the interviewers, and she's like, oh, I told all these lies saying that I was a librarian, and now he's going to realise that actually I am a scientist that's trying to get a job, and none of my lies match up, and it is their romance. I enjoyed seeing the dynamic between Elsie and her love interest, whatever his name is, Jack. I enjoyed the dynamic between Elsie and Jack. I think that they were well suited to each other. There was some angst between them. It was romantic, so I enjoyed them as a pairing. It was fun, it was enjoyable, it was a bingeable read. I was compelled to keep reading this one. I would say my favourite is still The Love Hypothesis. Maybe because I read it first, and these are quite formulaic and they do follow the same sort of plot beats. But I would say Love Hypothesis, then Love Theoretically, then Love on the Brain is definitely the weakest of the sort of three full-length books by Ali Hazelwood. I would recommend it if you enjoy the formula. If you enjoy her previous books, I expect you'll probably enjoy this one as well. I finished The Last Hours by reading Chain of Thorns, so finished off a series, thankfully, finally. The Last Hours, which is this series, is set in the Shadowhunter world, which is this whole sort of universe, fantasy universe that Cassandra Clare has created, and there are many series and many books in that world. And I would say that to read this one, you have to read The Infernal Devices, which is a trilogy following the parents from this series, and then you can read this trilogy. There is also 2 other series set in the modern day world, which I don't think you necessarily would need to read this. And I enjoyed this one. I think the series overall is quite strong, and I think it's well written, but I think this book was too long. I think that the romantic pairings within this series were done well, like the angst and the drama and the different pairings and the different characters and who they were ending up with. I think that was done quite well. Although I think it probably is quite drawn out. But by the time I got to this third book, the plot and the fantasy elements were not strong enough to carry the book, that a lot of the romantic subplots ended 2/3 of the way through, that there was a resolution there, and then we spent another 200 pages waiting for the book to get wrapped up. And I'm not reading these books, I'm more here for the romantic angst of these characters as opposed to the fantasy elements. And so those 200 pages felt like it took me ages to read, because I was like, are we ever going to get to the end? Because the characters are together now and we still haven't finished, and I'm ready for it to be over. I feel like there was a big plot hole right at the end, which it feels like a really big plot hole for like quite a few things. And that bothered me. I was like, but what about this? Like, your whole thing that you've just gone and said here does not make any sense with the rest of the world. It doesn't make any sense. So that bothered me a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think overall, if you're after it is a fun series. In general, apart from the end, the final bit here is quite compulsively readable. So I'd say if you have enjoyed previous Cassandra Clare books and previous books in the Shadowhunter world, then I think you should read The Last Hours. But maybe if you haven't started Cassandra Clare, then it's a long way to go. It's a lot of work. And I don't know if all of that work is worth it. I enjoyed my time with it, but I feel as though I don't it's a lot of work to get to here. I then read Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kwang, and I feel quite conflicted on this book. I have conflicting opinions on it. So this one is a contemporary following June and Athena, following university, they both go into publishing. Athena becomes a literary darling. Her books are well renowned, they're well reviewed. She is doing well for herself. She is making money from her publishing deals. Whereas June, her first book it sort of flops. It's a failure. It doesn't do very well. She's not making any money out of it. It didn't do well. It flopped. But her and Athena maintain friends. And then at the beginning of the book, we see events as Athena dies and June ends up stealing her unpublished manuscript and claiming it for her own. And then we follow the events following that as June edits the book and publishes the book, and then the consequences of publishing that book and the commentary on that and on the publishing industry. So why I'm so conflicted on this, I found this book very, very compulsively readable. Like, I was very, very addicted to reading it. I wanted to know what was going to happen. I couldn't put it down. The pages just turned themselves. Like, when I was reading it, I was engrossed. And I feel as though I have to give it props for that level of distraction and that level of like taking over my brain space whilst I was reading it. I was hooked. I was really, really hooked by this. However, I feel as though it falls short in the commentary. Like, so much of this book is built around commentary, and I feel as though the commentary should have gone further than it did. There are so many bits that it sort of glosses over and doesn't really dive into the detail, doesn't dive into the nitty-gritty of it. And it spends so much time looking at Twitter and Goodreads and like the modern things, which I think will really age this book. I think they're relevant for the last maybe 5 years, but who knows if they're not going to be relevant in 20 years time. And so I feel as though it ages. It's like a time capsule of this moment in publishing. I do feel a bit conflicted by that. And I also feel as though the ending was a non-ending. I was quite disappointed in where it got to. It felt as though there was an idea here. There was a strong idea here, and she had 3/4 of the book, but she didn't know how to end it. And I think there was like a saying somewhere towards the end, which was along those lines. And it really felt as though she didn't know how to end this book, because the ending it fell flat. It was disappointing. Like, you've got this idea, which is compelling and intriguing to read, but then it doesn't really go anywhere. It fizzles. It doesn't go out with a bang, it fizzles. And that's why I feel so conflicted on it, because I enjoyed my time reading this. I was compelled to read it, but looking back on it, I feel as though thematically it should have and could have been stronger, and the ending was disappointing. But then I had a lot of fun. So I have very mixed feelings on this. I think I've given it 4 stars because of how much I was compelled to read it and how invested I was in it. But I feel as though it's a 4 stars with faults. And then I will touch on briefly the 2 books that I started but did not quite finish. So I have now finished these in August, but I will dive more into my thoughts in my August wrap up. And August, I feel like it's going to be a big wrap up. I can sense it now because I've already finished 4 books in August. So I finished 4 books in July. I'm filming this on like the 6th of August, and I've already finished 4 books. So I've already finished the same amount of books as I read in July. And we're only 6 days in. So I did finish I did start and read quite a lot of The Mask of Mirrors. This is, again, another series that I'm rereading so that I can finish it off, with the 3rd book coming out later on in August. And so I listened to the audiobook of this. I really thoroughly enjoyed this. Especially, I feel as though the first 2/3 of this are like my favourite bits. The ending is absolutely fine. Like, the final third is absolutely fine, but I feel as though some of my favourite scenes are in that first half, the first 2/3. But this, you're following a main character, Ren, who is a con artist as she infiltrates one of the merchant families, only to find out that the family that she has decided to infiltrate is actually down their luck and they are struggling to get by. And it's a Venetian-inspired setting. There's lots of politics going on. The magic system's really interesting. There's a focus on tarot cards, dream magic. I really thoroughly enjoyed this from beginning to end. And then I also started in July, and I read quite a chunk of this. I finished this on the 1st of August, Slaying the Vampire Conqueror, which is a standalone in the Chronicles of Nyaxia world. And it's a fantasy romance following a main character who has been raised in like this cult, and as she is infiltrating the ranks of a vampire that is conquering her land. And her mission is to kill him. But is she or is she not going to fulfill those duties? I read the bulk of this actually in July. Both of these I read the bulk of in July and then just finished them off at the beginning of August. So these I haven't counted the pages in July, they'll be counted in August. Lots of progress made on these. Not my best reading month, but there were some chunkers in there, some chunky books, and it was a stressful month, which is why I feel as though August is already doing so much better. So much better with my reading this month because I've been in a much better place. So I will wrap it up there. Let me know what you read in the month of July, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!